Hello my friends, croeso gyfeillion. This is my channel where I discuss all things Welsh Celtic paganism. My name is Mara, I'm a Welsh Celtic pagan and a Welsh witch who is originally from Ynys Môn, the Isle of Anglesey. And today we're delving into the spooky and the creepy with all things Halloween. Halloween is fast approaching, of course, it's only a few days away. I was hoping to make this video sooner, but things happened and I didn't get it done. Now, of course, Halloween is associated with ancestor worship, the worship of our dearly departed, especially within neo-paganism. And of course, in neo-paganism today, this time of year is usually referred to as Samhain. Now, Samhain is the Irish Gaelic term for it, and of course, being a Gaelic word, the word Samhain, or Samhain, also relates to the practices in Scotland, or the traditions in Scotland surrounding this time of year. However, Wales is not a Gaelic culture. Welsh is not a Gaelic language. Welsh is a Brythonic language, a Celtic language through and through, and the word Samhain has no meaning in Welsh. I've seen a post going around social media, especially on Instagram, where people put, like, it's Samhain in Ireland, Samhain in Scotland, and something else, but also Samhain in Wales, and that's just clearly incorrect. That Samhain is not a word that has anything to do with Wales or Welsh Celtic culture. That doesn't mean, however, that we don't have our own version in Wales. We do. We have our own version in Wales, and the traditions surrounding this time of year in Wales are rich and expansive, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video, as well as ancestor worship and the connotations of ancestor worship within neo-pagan practice, as well as Celtic practice, which is more reconstructionist. Let's dive into it. Now, in Wales, this time of year is usually referred to, especially by modern Welsh speakers, as Calan Gaeaf. I grew up in a Welsh-speaking community. My family spoke Welsh, my schooling was in Welsh. I grew up completely Welsh. Up until the age of about 16, I never even spoke English within the education system, unless I was literally in an English class. And so I'm used to this time of year being referred to as Calan Gaeaf. Now, Calan Gaeaf means the calends of winter, or the first days of winter. And Calan Gaeaf would historically have fallen on the 1st of November, rather than the 31st of October, which is what we refer to as Halloween these days. Now, the 31st of October, however, would have been referred to as Norse Calan Gaeaf in historical Wales. Now, Norse Calan Gaeaf means the eve of Calan Gaeaf, or the eve of the first day of winter. And the 31st of October being a day of celebration before the first day of winter, and being a liminal time, that time between autumn and winter, it was referred to as an ysbrydnos. Now, an ysbrydnos, it literally translates to mean spirit night, or the eve of spirits. And there's 3 of them throughout the year in Wales, the tradition of ysbrydnosau, with Calan Gaeaf being the 3rd, most prominent and most potent of the 3 spirit nights. The spirit nights throughout the year were Calan Mai, or Beltane, May Day, the 1st of May, the summer solstice, and Calan Gaeaf, or Norse Calan Gaeaf, the eve of the first day of winter, Halloween today. Now, an ysbrydnos was a night when the spirits of the dead, the fae, ghosts and ghouls and goblins, phantoms and all sorts of otherworldly creatures roamed freely within the land of mortals, within the realm of mortals. It was a time when the otherworld, the Celtic otherworld, and our world was virtually one and the same. There's a saying within modern paganism where they say that Samhain, or Halloween, is the time of year when the veil is thin, when the veil is thinning. I don't like that expression, because have you looked at a veil? Veils are quite thin. If they get any thinner, they're basically not there. So the idea of a veil thinning really irks me for some reason. So I prefer to think of it as a night when the spirit world, or the other world, and the mortal world are one and the same. And It is a night when you will be able to see things or interact with things from the other world that you wouldn't usually get the chance to interact with. Now, of course, with there being 3 spirit nights throughout the year, each of them has different connotations. Now, the spirit night of Calan Gaeaf or Beltane and the spirit night of the summer solstice were predominantly associated with fairies or the Fae, whereas Calan Gaeaf or Norse Calan Gaeaf, Halloween, was mostly associated with ghouls, phantoms, and ghosts, the spirits of the dead. So, let's get into the idea of ancestor worship at this time of year. Of course, among most neo-pagan circles, as well as in Reconstructionist Celtic pagan practices, a lot of people refer to this time of year as the time to connect to the ancestors. So where does that come from? What do we know about ancestor worship in the ancient Celtic world? Short answer to that one is not much. We don't know very, very much about how the pre-Christian Celts would have worshipped their ancestors. Now, the pre-Christian Celts didn't record or write anything about their religious practices. All the sources we have on what they believed and or did stems from Christian or Roman sources. And so there's a lot of assuming that has to happen when we're trying to deduct what this time of year would have meant to the pre-Christian Celts. Regardless of that, however, this time of year has become a potent time to honour our ancestors. A practice or a belief does not need to be antiquated and extremely ancient and old in order for it to be authentic and beautiful. It's absolutely authentic for us to revere our ancestors and worship them. Now, of course, there are things from Wales, traditions and practices from Wales, that relate to worshipping your ancestors or honouring them at the very least at this time of year. However, they're not ancient Celtic practices that stem back to the pre-Christian era. A lot of these practices come from when Wales was very much Christian, as is the case with a lot of magical traditions and what we now refer to as Celtic paganism. A lot of it stems from a time when most people within this country would have been Christian. So let's dive into some Calan Gaeaf ancestor veneration and worship traditions. The first one I want to touch upon is the tradition of Hel Bwyd Cenad y Meirw. Now, I don't know the literal translation of that word, but it would have been something such as food for the assembly of the dead. And a lot of people refer to Hel Bwyd Cenad y Meirw today as awake or similar. Now, the Hel Bwyd Cenad y Meirw was a Celtic tradition of offering food to the dead. The food that they offered was usually a loaf of bread or a cake. And Hugh Evans records this tradition in his book Cwm Eithin and talks about how people used to do this on Calan Gaeaf, or the 31st of October, or the 1st of November, if you're looking at it like that. There's even a song from the late 19th century that people sang whilst conducting the offering. Now, I don't know the tune to the song, but I'll read it out to you. Dydd da I chi heddiw, bwyd cenad y meirw. Da ges I yma flwyddyn I heddiw. I don't really know how to translate that fully because it's very kind of formal Welsh. It's verse, so it doesn't have a literal translation. But it's something along the lines of good day to you today. We have food for the assembly of the dead, and something such as bless us today for the year to come. So yeah, that would have been one tradition that was recorded throughout the late 19th century or even up to the 18th century that we can record back. However, they might have, of course, ancient roots. Ronald Hutton notes a similar Halloween custom from Wales in his book Stations of the Sun, where people used to have a meal or a feast prepared, but before sitting down to have the feast or the meal, they would put a loaf of bread or a piece of food in the window for the ancestors. And as they did this, as they put the bread in the window, they would say, Mayst thou bless thy whole family. This we offer you on the eve of Halloween. Now, I've translated this from English into Welsh, and it would be something along the lines of Bendithiwch eich teulu, Offrwm bara I chi ar nos Calan Gaeaf. Now, me and my partner, we're both pagans, we're both witches. We do have some Calan Gaeaf traditions, and one of them that we have associated with this time of year is the idea of a feast in honour of our ancestors and setting aside an offering for our ancestors. So we do practice this tradition here in our household. We usually make a cawl, which is a Welsh word for a stew. We usually make a cawl which has potatoes and leek and all sorts of other vegetables, carrots and such. I can't even go through everything right now. And then of course vegetable stock, and we make that as a stew, and it's gorgeous, it's lovely, I love it so much. I can't wait to have it this year. And then we will make bread. We'll usually bake our own bread, or we'll go to the bakery if we're busy that year and we can't make our own bread. We'll go to the bakery and get some freshly made bread to eat with our stew or cawl. And then we will do this tradition. That's why I've got a Welsh translation. We will put a piece of bread in the window alongside 2 lit candles and 2 bucanod rutan, which I'll get into what a bucan rutan is in a second. 2 lit candles, 2 bucan rutans, and the bread in the middle, and we will say Bendithiwch eich teulu, offrwm bara I chi ar nos Calan Gaeaf. And usually we'll put 1 or 2 pieces of bread because we'll want to honour my ancestry, the side of my family, and my partner's ancestors. Now, a bucan rutan. I'm not sure how far back a bucan rutan goes. This is coming purely from experience growing up in Wales. We do bucan rutans on Halloween or Calan Gaeaf. And a bucan rutan is the Welsh equivalent of a pumpkin. Now, what's interesting is we call them bucan rutan, and we used to carve pumpkins when I was a kid because it was easy to get them from Tesco's or Morrison's or the post office down the road. It was easy enough to go there, buy a pumpkin and carve it for Halloween or Calan Gaeaf. However, the word bucan rutan literally translates to mean Swede or turnip ghoul, which means that it's definitely referring to an older tradition. Of course, if you've read into the folklore surrounding the jack-o'-lanterns in Ireland, you'll know that they originally were carved out of turnips or swedes. And the same must be true for Wales, because we literally still call them bucan rutan, Swede ghouls or turnip ghouls. And so yes, the idea of the turnip in the window, I was told growing up, was one of 2 things. It depended on who you asked. When I used to talk to my grandmother about it, my 9, she would say, you do a bucan rutan, you create a bucan rutan and put it in the window to help guide the spirits of your ancestors home for the night so that they could celebrate with you. My mother, however, my mum, she used to say that the bucan rutan, the point of the bucan rutan, was to put it in the window to scare away evil or malicious spirits and beings for the night. So either way, a pumpkin is very much still relevant to your modern traditions. However, if you want to make it more traditional or have that bit of ancient flair, you could always try, it's hard, trust me, I've tried, and carve a turnip or a swede. Now when I say swede, I mean the vegetable, not the people from Sweden. We're not that barbaric. And that, of course, brings us to more modern traditions. Now, I know that a lot of Celtic pagans today create an ancestor altar at this time of year. That is, they create a space in their home where they cover it with photographs of their ancestors, which I think is beautiful. I don't know if there's any antiquity to this tradition. However, like I said, just because something isn't antiquated and ancient does not mean it isn't beautiful and authentic. The idea of doing this is something I've always wanted to do, however I've never done because I don't have photos of my ancestors right now, and it's something I'm going to try and do going forward into the future. I'm going to try and find photos of my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and so forth, so that I can make a little ancestor altar at some point. And I think it's a very beautiful idea. It's a very good way to honour the ancestors, and of course you could always put the offering then if you're going to make a an offering of food to your ancestors on Calan Gaeaf, you could always put it on the ancestor altar, which I think is lovely. And that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that opened your eyes to a few aspects of what Calan Gaeaf and Norse Calan Gaeaf means here in Wales. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later. Bye!